Anyone else watch that crazy comeback of the Dallas Cowboys today? They were down 21 to nothing at one point. Then they rallied and ended up winning the game with 24 points over the Eagles. And, remember just at the beginning of the month, the big news with the Dallas Cowboys was that their player, Marshawn Kneeland, died at the age of 24. Of course, he was drafted in the year 24, and he died 24 days after the Dallas Cowboy owner's birthday. But something I pointed out right after he died was that his final game just so happened to be on November 3rd, which is a Monday night against the Cardinals. And he scored his first career touchdown in that game, which is kind of odd because he plays defense. And I mean, how often does the defense really score? So he scores a touchdown, and then his final game's on November 3rd, and then he dies a few days later. But look at his name, Kneeland. And November 3rd, his final game just so happened to be on Colin Kaepernick's birthday. Colin Kaepernick, right? The face of the kneeling during the NFL. Kneeling. Colin Kaepernick's birthday was his final game where he scored his first ever career touchdown. Of course, he was 24 years old, drafted in 24, dies 24 days after the Cowboys owner's birthday. Now the Cowboys come back and beat the Eagles, and they score 24 points in that game. And remember the game right after they had a bye week after he died, and then they played the Las Vegas Raiders, and they did a tribute to him in that game. And that tribute happened to happen just before they sang the national anthem of all things, right? Kneeling during the national anthem. So they do a tribute to him. Then they go right into the national anthem. And in that game, there was a bunch of fours in that game, right? The Cowboys got their fourth win. Dak Prescott had 4 touchdowns, passes, and he wears the number 4. 4 and 24. They're just very big numbers around the Cowboys this year. Remember, the Cowboys opened up the season against the Philadelphia Eagles as well, and that game was all about 4. Remember Jalen Carter, the Philadelphia Eagles player who spit on Dak Prescott, right? Jalen Carter, this guy right here. He spit on Dak Prescott. Notice his birthday, 4-4. Jalen Carter's birthday, 4-4. And look at this language of gematria, right? Jalen Carter. His name just so happens to equal 44. He was born on 4-4. The word spit just so happens to equal 44. He spit on number 4, Dak Prescott. And, notice Jalen Carter, even also 24 years old. Jalen Carter, 24. If you write out the word 4 even equals 24, right? 4 equals 24. That game also had a lightning delay. Remember there was a lightning delay in that game? And that lightning delay just so happened to happen with 4:44 left in the third quarter. 4 minutes and 44 seconds, while the Eagles had 24 points. So they were winning by 4 with 24 points. Even if you total the score, that's 44. 4-4. And if you were watching that game just before the lightning delay, Miles Sanders, who wears the number 24, number 24 for the Cowboys, Miles Sanders, just so happened to fumble, and it was his 4th carry of the game. So, I mean, just think about it, 24, and then the number 4 and 44. Very important. The number 4 and the number 24, and they even have a relationship to each other, And remember that opening game was also on the date September 4th, 9/4. Has a bunch of other interesting things with it, but think about 9/4 and think about how Marshawn Kneeland wore the number 94. You could also write it as 4/9, like they would do in other countries. On pretty much everywhere else in the world, they would write the date as 4/9, and Eagles equal 49 and Dallas equals 49. But to stay on topic, it seems to be connected to the Marshawn Kneeland who died age, 24. And these Cowboys and Eagles games are all synced up to the number 24 and the number 4. And another big thing that happened on that day was that the opening game of the season on 9/4, that just so happened to be Beyonce's 44th birthday, right? Beyonce, her 44th birthday. And remember, Beyonce has that album that she released in the year 24, and it's called Cowboy Carter. And then think about Jalen Carter the guy who spit on the cowboy. You know, Jalen Carter, Cowboy Carter, on Beyonce's 44th birthday, when Jalen Carter's born on 4/4. You know, his name equals 44, spit equals 44, the word lightning equals 44. They had the lightning delay at 4:44 in the third quarter when the score was totaled 44 points. But remember, Beyonce last year also did that halftime show, the Cowboy Carter halftime show. And that just so happened to be 4 days. It was on Christmas, right? I don't know if I have it in here, but you can find it. Look up the Cowboy Carter halftime show that she did on Christmas last year. And that just so happened to be 4 days before Jimmy Carter, the former president, died. You know, 4 days before Jimmy Carter dies, Cowboy Carter. Then we get this game on her 44th birthday where the guy with the last name Carter spits on the cowboy. And, you know, of course, then we get Marshawn Kneeland, who dies age 24. And look, Jimmy Carter, born in 24, dies in the year 24. I mean, you could go even further with it all, too. You know, like Beyonce is with Jay-Z, right? And he has that album called 444. A whole bunch of stuff with this. But just know that number 4 is very important here. But in relation to all this, something that I've been pointing out for the majority of the summer, probably back even to May, I've been following this theme with the Denver Broncos, and there's a big horse narrative that has been going on. Of course, next year is the year of the horse in Chinese astrology, and there's a whole bunch of stuff with the god Neptune. The god Neptune actually is the god of horses. Of course, you know, Super Bowl 48, when the Broncos lost to the Seahawks, that was in a Chinese horse year as well. And, you know, we had all them people like Phil Robertson was in the news, the Duck Dynasty guy for hating gay people. Then Uncle Phil died. The word Philip actually means lover of horses. And in the pregame show of that Super Bowl, the American Idol guy named Philip Phillips was singing a song called Gone, Gone, Gone. And then they went to breaking news that the actor Philip Seymour Hoffman had died, right? Lover of horses. Neptune's also the god of the sea, right? The sea, and the god of horses. And the Seahawks and the Broncos with the horse logo were playing in that Super Bowl. And Philip Seymour Hoffman also was born on Neptunalia, once again. But there's a big interesting thing here because the Super Bowl this year is going to be played in Levi's Stadium. And Moses just so happened to be in the tribe of Levi. And Moses bred in the age of Aries, which is a ram. And, just oddly enough, on January 26th, Neptune in astrology is going to be moving back into Aries for the next 12 years. And just after the Super Bowl, we're going to be in a Chinese horse year again. But in relation to Levi's Stadium, Super Bowl 50 was also in Levi's Stadium. And that's when the Broncos won with 24 points over the Carolina Panthers. And Beyonce just so happened to be part of that halftime show. Beyonce was part of that halftime show with Coldplay. And remember earlier in the summer, the big thing that was going around was that Coldplay kiss cam that was all linked up to the Denver Broncos, right? So then we got Beyonce, who has the Cowboy Carter album, with the cover where she's riding the white horse that reminds me of the Denver Bronco logo. You had the Coldplay Kiss Cam stuff that was, it's linked up to Super Bowl 50 in Levi's Stadium, and Super Bowl 60 that's upcoming is also going to be in Levi's Stadium. And we also had that Midtown Manhattan shooter, right? The Midtown Manhattan shooter here. And he went to the same high school as John Elway, and he was supposedly trying to shoot up the NFL office in New York, right? And a whole bunch of stuff. It's linked up to when the Broncos came back down 33 against New York back in October. Remember that? That was all about the number 33. This guy supposed to kill himself on the 33rd floor. There's a whole bunch of other reasons why, but I don't want to get too advanced. I'm trying to make these kind of simple for people to understand, but there is a cipher that has to do with composite numbers, and it's this guy's name equals 324 in that, and there's a humongous narrative with the Denver Broncos and the number 324, such as Peyton Manning's birthday's on 324. And in 2022, there was a stadium fire at the Denver Broncos stadium on the date 324. And like Russell Wilson equals 324 in that cipher. Russell Wilson was for the Seahawks in Super Bowl 48 that beat the Broncos, and then he got traded to the Broncos, and now he plays for the New York Giants. And of course, the New York Giants, Daniel Jones now plays for the Colts, the horse team, and he took over for Eli Manning, Peyton's brother, when they were at the Giants. Of course, Daniel Jones's name also equals 324. But, well, this guy's name doesn't equal, but Midtown Manhattan equals 324. And that, it's synced up to the Denver Broncos narrative that I've been following, all year. So, what else is interesting in relation to Marshawn Kneeland and Colin Kaepernick is the fact that Colin Kaepernick played for the San Francisco 49ers, which is the team that is hosting the Super Bowl, the team that plays in Levi's Stadium. And, remember how Super Bowl 50 was in Levi's Stadium? It was the Denver Broncos versus the Carolina Panthers, the white Bronco versus the black Panther, and logos. And remember, just before that Super Bowl, Netflix released the documentary The People versus O.J. Simpson, right? Remember O.J. Simpson, the guy who got away in the white Bronco? Of course, the Black Panthers were founded in the San Francisco Bay in Oakland by Huey P. Newton, and the star quarterback for the Carolina Panthers that year just so happened to be Cam Newton. And of course, in that Super Bowl, the halftime show, Beyonce did a tribute to the Black Panthers and also to Malcolm X. And that's interesting because, once again, this number 24 and Marshawn Kneeland dying at age 24, the letter X is the 24th letter. And if you write out Malcolm, it equals 24. And the Broncos won with 24 points. Even the Panthers, they scored 10 points, which in Roman numerals, which they usually use in the NFL thing, but they didn't this year, which made me think that it was important, X equals 10 in Roman numerals, right? And then this Super Bowl, they decided to not use Roman numerals, and they went with the number 50 instead. But this Super Bowl also happened in 2016, and then later that year was when Colin Kaepernick decided to take a knee and start that whole controversy. But like I said, Beyonce, she wore an X right here on her, and then they did a Black Panther tribute and a Malcolm X tribute, and the Black Panthers are playing in the Super Bowl. But that Super Bowl too, the big thing in that Super Bowl was that Cam Newton fumbled the ball, and he didn't even try to jump on it. If you go watch it, absolutely just completely rigged. I don't know how they made the ball go to this exact spot or whatever, somehow magic or something or whatever, but you could tell he didn't even try to get the ball if you go back and watch it. But after he fumbled, the Broncos got the ball on the 4-yard line with 4:04 left in the fourth quarter, and that was the Panthers' fourth turnover, And what's even more interesting is right before Marshawn Kneeland died, or, before his final game, the game before that, the Cowboys lost to the Denver Broncos, and the Cowboys scored 24 points and got their fourth loss of the season, and the Broncos scored 44 points, right? So it just seems to be this narrative that goes back to the Denver Broncos somehow. Oddly enough, Super Bowl 24, the Broncos lost to San Francisco in Super Bowl 24 even. The Broncos lost. Notice Marshawn Kneeland, he also played college at Western Michigan, whose mascot is the Bronco. And Marshawn Kneeland also died in Frisco, Texas, reminding us of, that's the, people call San Francisco Frisco, right? So Marshawn Kneeland even dies in Frisco, Texas, reminding us of San Francisco. He played college where the mascot was the Bronco. Of course, his name equals 324. And so does Dallas Cowboys in that composite cipher. I even just randomly looked up the first time the Denver Broncos won a Super Bowl, and the first time they won a Super Bowl was over the Packers at Super Bowl 32. And notice it says the game started at 3:24, and they beat the Packers, who scored 24 points, It's pretty weird. Of course, Super Bowl 32 makes sense because if you write out Denver, it equals 32, and if you write out Broncos, it equals 32. So I mean, it's really fitting that their first ever Super Bowl win was Super Bowl 32 when Denver's 32, Broncos 32. You know, in relation to like the kneeling during the NFL, the Eagles were very, very important to that as well. So the Eagles, you know, a lot of this is connected to the Cowboys playing the Eagles. And remember back in Colin Kaepernick originally started kneeling in 2016, but in 2017 that's when it got really big because Donald Trump started calling it out. He called it out on September 23rd, which is 23/9, and that stands out because the flag was originally sewn at 239 Arch Street in Philadelphia, and Donald Trump was born on Flag Day, and there was all kinds of 239s. The 52nd prime is even 239. Then later that year was Super Bowl 52, that was all linked up to the kneeling during the national anthem that the Philadelphia Eagles went on to win. They even gave us a story right before that Super Bowl about how Donald Trump weighed 239 pounds. Like, who really cares? But, you know, it was linked up to that Super Bowl. But, you know, and that was Super Bowl was at US Bank Stadium. There's a big old narrative with the stock market and stuff. But notice US Bank Stadium equals 88, just like the word kneel equals 88. Just like if you read out Colin Kaepernick, it equals 88. Just like if you write out the Star Spangled Banner. I won't even capitalize it, but the Star Spangled Banner equals 88. Trump equals 88. I mean, it was Super Bowl 52 that was held in Minnesota that equals 52. Whole bunch of other things, you know, but the 52nd prime number just so happens to be 239, right? The flag sewn at 239 Arch Street. And then the Eagles went on to win that Super Bowl. So there's an interesting narrative there with the Eagles. We also had another spitting game where Jamar Chase spit on Jalen Ramsey, right? Another guy named Jalen that's involved in a spitting game. And if you go from Jalen Ramsey's birthday to the day that he got spit on, just so happens to be 24 days later, right? And he was born on the 24th, even the 24th of October, 24 days after his birthday. And the guy who spit on him played for the Bengals, and Bengals equal 24. And it has to be some type of weird tribute because Super Bowl 56 was the Bengals versus the Rams, and you know, Jalen Ramsey had played for the Rams that year, and they beat the Bengals in the Super Bowl, and both of these guys played each other against, you know, and that was in 2022, which was just before the Bronco Stadium caught on fire on 3/24. But another interesting thing with that is the Rams that year, they signed Von Miller. And notice Von Miller currently wears the number 24 for the Washington Commanders. But Von Miller just so happened to be a famous Denver Bronco, and he was the MVP of Super Bowl 50 when they won at Levi's Stadium. You know, another thing, too, is way back in the day when Colin Kaepernick first took a knee and all that, I was pointing out a whole bunch of stuff, how it was connected to the Rams. Because, like, Colin Kaepernick, the last game that he started before he took a knee just so happened to be against the Rams when they played in St. Louis. So the last game he started was against the Rams. Then the next season, he didn't start the very first game. He didn't even play. And their first game was against the Rams. And even more, and then he started every game after that, right? So he didn't play against the Rams, and then he started every game after that. And the year before, his last start was against the Rams. And the year that he took a knee, 2016, look at the 49ers. The only regular season games that they won 2 games, and there was both against the Rams. So I'm interested to see like how it all plays out here. If it's going to go with that Philadelphia narrative that's linked to kneeling, or if it is this Rams narrative. I do have a few blog posts where I'm talking about the Rams this year as well, so we will see. I don't know. From doing this, the narrative that I'm following is always linked up to the Super Bowl every single year, but it doesn't always predict who's going to be in the Super Bowl. There's like some weird, you'd be like, oh, I never saw this connection to this team to the Rams, you know, or whatever, or it's just wild, but it makes a lot more sense the closer that you get. But Man, I don't know. There's a humongous horse narrative that has been going on all year, ever since the Kentucky Derby that was all linked up to Russia and Ukraine. And of course, Ukraine has the same colors as the Rams, and Russia invaded Ukraine right after the Rams had won the Super Bowl. So there's, I don't know. The Colts are pretty good this year also, and the Colts have that connection back to the Broncos. The Broncos are connected to the white Bronco that's connected to O.J. Simpson, and O.J. Simpson played for the Buffalo Bills. O.J. Simpson's full name equals 324. Nicole Simpson equals 324. O.J. Simpson got out of prison on Jimmy Carter's birthday right after Donald Trump called out the kneeling in the NFL. So once again, I don't know. I don't know what narrative is gonna to hit, but there's a lot of. I just want to point out the connections. So you just can't even make some of this stuff up. How it all links all together. I even looked up Bad Bunny. I wondered if Bad Bunny being at the halftime show had something to do with horses, maybe. And I just find it interesting when I looked up Bad Bunny. There's an article about him and Kendall Jenner riding horses on TMZ, and it's just interesting. Kendall Jenner, in relation to OJ, her middle name is Nicole, and her middle name is Nicole because she was named after Nicole Simpson, OJ's wife, right? And look at her birthday, November 3rd, the same day as Colin Kaepernick's birthday. Of course, her mom was married to the Kardashian guy who represented OJ, right? And then she was friends with Nicole Simpson, so it, caused a little turmoil in the family, supposedly. But just weird, The story about him and horses has to do with something that's connected back to OJ. And of course, after 2022, we had at the end of that season or whatever, in the beginning of 2023, we had Damar Hamlin, the Buffalo Bills player, collapse, and his birthday is also 3/24, same day as Peyton Manning's birthday. But there's some big narrative going on here with it all. Some of the Denver Broncos are super related. Just can't make it up, so we'll keep following the narrative, I'm interested to see how it all plays out. I'm probably missing some little piece to it, but a definite horse theme. I have a video that I'm going to be uploading to YouTube. It's like 3 hours long. Hopefully I'll have it uploaded sometime tomorrow night. If you want to go a little bit more in depth, then you'll understand. But it's a lot to follow if you're new. This video is probably too hard to follow if you're new as well. But yeah, so just type in Dan Barrett on YouTube. You should be able to find it. It's not that hard. Just literally Dan Barrett. And it should come up, and hopefully I'll have it on there. It'll probably be late tomorrow night, but very long video. I talk about Charlie Kirk and a bunch of stuff, like OJ's wife got stabbed a bunch in the neck, and there's that movie Snake Eyes where Charles Kirkland, the politician, gets shot in the neck, and it's all linked up to South Park, and South Park has the Book of Mormon. Then we got that Mormon church shooting, which is the 324th mass shooting of the year, and the guy who did it, his name equals 324. Of course, the South Park people are from Colorado. They went to college where the Colorado Buffalo play. Then we got Shedeur Sanders, who just had his first start, and his dad coaches the Colorado Buffaloes. And there's that same day that there was the Charlie Kirk shooting, there was a school shooting at Evergreen High School in Colorado, and that's where Trey Parker, one of the creators of South Park, went to school. But that school's on Buffalo Road. And the Colorado Buffalo just got a new mascot, Ralphie 7. Of course, there's an old episode of South Park where they have a GoFundMe, and all the NFL owners are meeting up, and the one that's missing is the Buffalo Bills owner, and his name was Ralph. But yeah, I'm going to leave it there. It's already longer than I wanted it to be, but just saying, if you want to check out a longer video, way more in-depth video, I should be posting one on YouTube sometime late tomorrow night, so peace.